Hey there, it's the man of recaps. Time for House of Cards Season 3. Doug Stamper left for dead after Rachel bashed him in the head last season. He does survive, but he will have some serious physical therapy to go through. He goes to see now President Frank Underwood, but Frank has no use for weakness, and he's like, you heal yourself and come back later. I've got Remy Danton as my chief of staff now. Frank's trying to pass a big jobs bill called America Works, but it's not working, and the Democratic leadership does not want him to run for president in the next election. Of course Frank's gonna run for president, so he assembles his team. He's got Remy Danton as chief of staff, and Seth Grayson, his media correspondent. They get Majority Whip Jackie Sharp on board in exchange for her becoming vice president, because Donald Blythe is not going to stay on the ticket. Jackie and Remy, by the way, had an affair last season, but it's over now. She's dating some surgeon. But first, Frank has to deal with the Russian president, Viktor Petrov, who is basically exactly Putin. They're working on some sort of joint Middle East peace deal, and they're having a lot of fun at the banquet. They're doing shots of vodka, but behind closed doors, Petrov's like, nah, I'm not working with you at all. In fact, screw you. Frank named his wife, Claire Underwood, ambassador to the UN, despite Congress saying no, and she's trying to get the Middle East thing going through there, but Russia shuts it down again. The Russian ambassador is like, you are a woman, we don't respect you, but she employs the intimidation tactic of making him watch her pee? Anyway, the Democrats want their presidential nominee to be Heather Dunbar, the special prosecutor who was investigating Frank last season. Frank tries to cut this off by nominating her to be a Supreme Court justice, which would be great, but instead, she announces her campaign for presidency, and she's like, Frank, you are a criminal and slimy, and I'm gonna beat you. Dunbar gets a shady call from Doug Stamper with his cane in the shadows, and he's like, hey, Frank doesn't want me, I'm willing to work for you now behind the scenes. He's also working with Hacker Guy, who as part of his deal is stuck working for the FBI, which he hates, but he's having him track down Rachel in exchange for being allowed to leave the country. The Russia situation escalates when an American citizen is arrested over there for protesting gay rights. Petrov is willing to work out a deal, but the guy has to read an apology, which he refuses to do. Claire stays to convince him all night long, and when she wakes up, oh, he hung himself! Oh, that's scarring. Frank and Petrov finally come to an agreement, and they're reading a prepared statement, but Claire can't help herself. She says, shame on you, on live TV. So Frank and Claire have their biggest fight yet. Now let me introduce novelist Tom Yates. He wrote a famous book called Scorpio that everyone loved, so Frank wants to bring him on to write a book about America Works. But Tom is really good at cutting to the core of people, and pretty soon he and Frank become friends, and as tends to happen with Frank, things get weirdly sexual one night, but that doesn't go anywhere. But anyway, Tom had a front row seat to see the Underwoods fight, and then make up, and then fight again. And he's like, you know what, Frank? This book is not about America Works, it's about your marriage, and he writes it, and it's incredible, but Frank's like, obviously we can't use any of this, so long story short, he's fired. So Frank is really pushing this America Works program, but Congress refuses to fund it. So he goes to FEMA and raids all the emergency disaster relief funds to start it up in DC. Of course, a hurricane shows up, and they have no funds, so he needs to go to Congress to replenish the money, and they're like, only if you kill America Works, so he has no choice but to sign it, and unfortunately, the hurricane bails away anyway. But people liked America Works because it really did work, and so he officially announces that he's running for president. Meanwhile, Hacker Guy can only do so much online, so he tracks down Rachel's ex-girlfriend in person, and long story short, he pretends to have AIDS so that she'll open up to him about how they always wanted to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico. With the narrowed down search, he's able to find her, but unfortunately, she died in a fire. Doug Stamper's super sad because he was sort of in love with her. He starts drinking again. He is an alcoholic, by the way, and he gives the president the good news that Rachel's dead, but then, like, cries in his lap because he's drunk. So they finally got the United Nations Middle East thing going, but some Russians get killed one day, which makes them escalate in the area, and the ambassador secretly tells Claire that the Russians killed their own men in order to escalate. So Frank authorizes covert ops to go in and find proof of that, but it goes terribly wrong and a guy gets killed, and just the situation gets worse. Frank has to go down there in person to meet with Petrov, and he's like, all right, what do you want to get out of here? And Petrov's like, I want you to fire your wife from the UN. He's like, what? Why? And he's like, yo, because she embarrassed me on TV, and plus it'll hurt you. Plus look at these abs, bro. Do you want a mess? So Frank has to fire Claire, and they have their even bigger fight yet. So Frank's first debate with Heather Dunbar is coming up. Jackie Sharp is ostensibly running for president too. The plan is she'll drop out later and support Frank, but in the meantime, she's going to attack Dunbar so Frank can remain presidential. Now, she's not super comfortable with this, so she checks with Dunbar, and she's like, hey, Frank's going to make me vice president if I drop out and support him. What can you offer me? And she's like, nothing. I'm an honest politician that will choose the best person for the job. And it's like, what? Okay. So at the debate, she attacks Heather relentlessly, bringing her kids into it, which is just like, wow, not cool, man. And even Frank's like, yeah, not cool. She's like, I don't feel comfortable with this dynamic where you have all the power. And he's like, I don't care what you feel comfortable with. I do have all the power. Now shut up and get in line. So Jackie drops out and supports Dunbar even without any promises from her. And Remy's like, you know what, Frank's a dick, I'm gonna resign too. These two start their affair up again, even though Jackie is technically married now to her surgeon. They offer Remy a spot on Dunbar's campaign, but he's like, you know what, I'm tired of politics, I'm gonna retire, see you next season. Dunbar's in the lead for now, but Frank is gaining quickly because people love Claire Underwood. Heather hates playing dirty, but Stamper tells her about the journal that proves Claire lied about the abortions, and is like, I'll sell this to you. But really, he brings it to Frank, and he's like, hey, I've always been your man. He burns it in front of him and is like, give me my job back as chief of staff, and so Stamper's back on the team. He gets distracted though by a call from Hacker Dude, who is safely out of the country, and says he lied, Rachel is still alive, and he'll tell him where she is in exchange for him getting his friend out of prison. Doug decides to do it the old-fashioned way, though, and beat him till he talks. He finds Rachel, who's having a pretty nice life in Santa Fe, kidnaps her, and is gonna kill her this time. She's like, sorry I almost killed you, but I promise I won't ever talk to anyone, just let me go. And he's like, yeah, I still sort of love you, so he lets her go. But then he thinks better of it, figures I'll just kill her right now, get it over with. So, sad Doug. Frank wins the Iowa caucus, but Claire's mad because she's sick of being in his shadow, and he's like, I'm the president, what do you want? So their fight comes to a head, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna leave you. And that's how season 3 comes to an end. Hey, thanks for watching the Man of Recaps. Stay tuned for House of Cards Season 4, or watch any of these other cool videos.